In this video, we will examine the Hazardous Materials Table. You will learn what all of the columns mean in the table and what information they provide. We will also discuss hazardous substances. The Hazardous Materials Table can be found on the web in the link provided in the description of the video, or if you're following along using a Hazmat Materials Compliance book, it will be under the section marked Hazmat Table as a tab and found under or around page 120. Just looking at the chart, you will see the second column, Hazardous Materials Description and Proper Shipping Name, is listed in column 2. The chart is in order alphabetically using column 2. If for some reason you only had the UN number available, you could look it up using a search of the table. Or if you have the Hazmat Pocketbook, you will find an ID cross-reference section looking at the little tab areas. It's around page 75, but again, those page numbers are going to be a little different based on the edition you're using. But on that cross-reference list, you're going to find it's in order of UN number. Once you have the proper shipping name listed, you could then return to the table to find the details of the hazardous materials you are using. Okay, we're going to work from left to right, so starting with column 1, this section is the symbol area. Each symbol has a different meaning, and they can be found just before the Hazmat table online at 172.101, or just before the actual table in the compliance book. The plus symbol fixes the proper shipping name, hazard class, and packing group. When that symbol is present on the table, it indicates the material is known by DOT to pose a risk to humans. Moving on, the letter A would indicate the regulations apply only if the hazardous material is transported by aircraft. However, if the material is a hazardous substance or waste, the HMR would apply regardless. D in the symbol column identifies a proper shipping name accepted for domestic transportation. It may not be acceptable for international regulations. G for generic hazmat. When this letter is there, there's a technical name that must be entered in parentheses near the basic description. I'm going to give an example here of UN 1760 corrosive liquid, NOS, which NOS stands for not otherwise specified, and then you can see in the parentheses it's going to have octanial chloride, or it could also be written as contains octanial chloride. The letter I indicates it's for international transportation of hazmat. And last, the letter W indicates the regulations apply only if the material is transported by water. However, again, if the material is a hazardous substance or waste, the HMR would apply regardless. Looking at column 2 now, this gives you the proper shipping name of the hazmat. So let's look at the fourth entry in the column, acetal. So if you were writing a shipping paper, which we'll get in greater detail in another video, it would be UN 1088 acetal 3 packing group 2. This is where that proper shipping name is found. Now, let's take a look at the first entry in the hazmat table where it says acetylene. Then it says CP nitrosodimethane, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. You will notice the acetylene is in italics. You'll also notice there is no information in the chart about the hazmat details. It is telling you acetylene is not a proper shipping name. You must instead look up the p-nitrodicimethylene. At some point in the past, you could probably have used acetylene, but not any longer. The proper shipping name must be the same as the hazmat table listing when creating the hazmat shipping paper details. So it's telling you don't use this acetylene. Go ahead and go to p-nitrodicimethane in the same table. You would go down and find that in the list, and then it would give you the UN number and all the details. But you can't use what's in italics. If you're looking in the Hazmat Materials Table book, you're going to see that all of the proper shipping names are in bold, versus the italics being used when it's not the proper shipping name. Column 3 is the hazmat class. You can again refer to Table 1 and Table 2 to find out what the hazmat class means. So let's take acetal again. UN 1088 acetal 3 packing group 2. Now if we refer to Table 2, because it is a Table 2 hazmat, we will see it's a flammable liquid, needing the flammable placard. Column 4 is simply going to always be the identification number, which will always start with either UN or NA. Packing group is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1 is the highest danger level, 2 is medium danger, and 3 is minor danger. It is called packing group because it also gives the shipper an idea of what type of package to use. On a cardboard box, for instance, for hazmat you'll see a letter number combination. The letter X being the highest cardboard box type can be used for packing group 1, 2, or 3. The box is constructed well enough to hold the highest packing group, so it can logically hold the other two as well. The letter Y would only be good for packing group 2 or 3. The letter Z is only good for packing group 3. So 1 highest danger, 2 medium danger, 3 minor danger, associated with the type of hazmat you're doing. Class 2, Class 7, and Division 6.2 do not have packing groups. We are on to column 6 of the hazmat table, so now we're looking at label codes. The label code is telling the shipper what type of warning label stickers to affix to the packaging. There is a chart called Label Substitution Chart inside 172.101, which you will find before the Hazardous Materials Table. The first label code will always be the same as the primary hazard class, and in many cases there is only one label code. Example again is acetal. In the instance where there's more than one label code, we get into subsidiary hazards. You would put stickers for all types of labels on the packaging, but you are not required to placard the subsidiary hazard. Permissive placarding would allow it, but if you are doing hazmat by rail, the railroad does not permit permissive placarding. So in that case, you only placard the main hazard class. If you were making a shipping paper, the label codes beyond the first one become a subsidiary hazard and get entered with a parenthesis. Again, there is not a reason to placard the subsidiary hazards. Let's do a couple examples, making the shipping paper using label codes. The first one, acidic anhydride, the main hazardous material is Class 8 corrosive. You would placard Class 8 corrosive. The subsidiary goes on the shipping paper with parentheses around it. In this case, 3 for flammable liquids. One more, looking at acetyl chloride. Again, you would put both label stickers on the packaging itself, but you only placard Class 3 flammable liquid. And the Class 8, corrosive in this instance, the subsidiary hazard, you would not need to placard corrosive. Moving on to column 7, which is special provisions. This column will contain numbers and or letters with numbers. You can find what each one means under 172.102 or on the tab marked Special Provisions in the Hazmat Compliance Pocketbook. If it is simply a number in the column and no letter, it is multimodal in application and may apply to bulk and non-bulk packaging. A only applies to aircraft mode, so if you're moving the hazmat by aircraft. B only applies to bulk packagings. Unless otherwise provided in the subchapter, the special provisions do not apply to UN/IM specification portable tanks or IBCs. IB, a code container IB or IP, only applies to transportation in IBCs. N refers to non-bulk packaging requirements. R is only transport by rail. T only applies in UN or IM specification portable tanks. TP only applies when it refers to portable tank special provision for UN or IM specification. W, these only apply if they're transport by water. Once you start looking at them, you'll see numbers 1 through 441 listed as numbers. Then you'll see A1 through A212. I bring that up because the letters aren't telling you to read the number assigned, but rather find the A section and look up A112, for example. And this example is on the screen here. When you see a letter and a number in this case, A112 means it only applies to movement by air, and you would look up the actual A number code. You're not looking through the first 441 number examples. You're looking up under the A section. It'll actually say A112, meaning each letter has its own section or provisions. So let's look at an example. We're going to go back to my favorite, acetone. In column 7 in the hazmat chart, we see 3 listings: IB2, T4, and TP1. So we'd go to the IB section and we find IB2. We know this only applies if it's an IBC container move. Assuming we were moving in an IBC container, we would look up IB2. And here's what it says. Next, if T4, we know this only applies to transportation in UM or IM specification portable tanks. So again, we'd look up T4 under the T section, and here's what T4 showed. TP1, it was the last one. This would only refer to if we were moving in portable tank special provision for UN or IM specification. And this is what this one showed. More likely than not, for those watching this, you thought, well, these seem to have nothing to do with my role. However, when it does apply to the shipment you handle, it is more likely to come into play. If your special provision was simply a number, it applies to all modes of transportation. So let's see what number 13 says. So I just randomly pulled number 13. This is telling us information that goes in the shipping paper to properly describe the hazardous material. Inhalation hazard must be entered on the shipping paper. It will also give us some information to the shipper about what type of labels to use and that they must be opposite sides. So while often they may not pertain to your particular role in the hazmat chain, they are worth checking in case it does pertain to your role, like the person making the shipping paper. First, moving along, this section of the table we're going to talk about next is not in the compliance handbook. We're going to be talking about packaging, 173 point asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It is online, column 8. The reason it says 173 asterisk, asterisk, asterisk is because it's telling you where to look up the information in the regulations listed under 173. So take the first one, acidic acid glacial. Under exceptions, 173.154 is where you look up the information for it in the regulations. These are the exceptions that exist with regard to packagings. Note, if it says none, that means no exceptions exist. Now, moving forward, non-bulk, 173.202. Section refers to authorized packaging types to use in transport of hazmat when shipping non-bulk. And then bulk refers to the type of packaging requirements when shipping a bulk load. Column 9 and column 10, just for completeness, we're going to discuss it real briefly. Column 9 deals with quantity limitations for passenger-carrying aircraft and passenger-carrying trains. Column 10 deals with vestige stowage requirements. Since my specialty is with trucking and hazmat, I'm not really going to get into this other than to say that it exists and it does give you some information if you're moving modes of that type. Okay, now we get into hazardous substances. All hazardous substances are also hazardous materials. A hazardous substance is a material, including its mixtures or solutions, that is listed in Appendix A to 172.101, and in a quantity in one package that exists or exceeds the reportable quantity listed in Appendix A. So let's break that down a little. It's a name or waste code is listed in Appendix A of the Hazmat Table, and the weight of the material is equal to or greater than its reportable quantity in a single package. That makes it a hazardous substance. So let's even just look at the second one on this list, acetamide. It's showing in reportable quantities if a single package of it weighed more than 100 pounds or 45.4 kilograms, this would be a reportable quantity. What that means is it should be marked on the shipping paper as a reportable quantity, and we'll get into that in the shipping paper section, but it would be with the letters RQ. Once that is known, it also becomes made aware to the driver because when he has the shipping paper in hand, he can see, oh, I'm also dealing with a hazardous substance, and then he can react accordingly. But so it's important to understand what the RQ is referring to. It's a single package, not the whole load. Now, Table 2 lists radionuclides that are hazardous substances and their corresponding RQs. The RQs in Table 2 for radionuclides are expressed in units of curie and terabercurols. And I have no idea what a terabercurol is, but it is some form of measurement. And when it is over those amounts in terabercurols, it then is also a reportable quantity. I don't think anyone watching this video is going to be tested on what sort of terabuicals and atomic numbers deal with, because you should be getting your training somewhere else if you're dealing with this, because it looks complicated. But anyway, that would also make it a reportable quantity, and it's just important to understand what a reportable quantity is. So once you know something is an RQ, what you're doing with it if you're preparing the shipping paper is you want to put it either before or right after the basic description. So here's an example here of UN 1098. You can see you could either put the RQ right before it or right after it.